Conflicts. We wish they didn't happen. We wish when they happen that we would win all the time. But neither of this happens. Conflicts happen, and sometimes we win, and sometimes we don't win. I'm going to ask you to take a short survey, and that's called the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument. The link to that is in the description of this video. So take the survey and you will come up with your preferred style of conflict resolution. Before we go to the issue of styles, let me speak to you about conflicts themselves. I have been in the business of conflict resolution formally and informally from 1979 onwards, and this is 2019. That's a lot of years. I worked in Guyana in South America in the mining company called Guy Mine, and there we dealt with a communist Marxist unionized labor force. I spent 5 years there, and in those 5 years I can't even remember how many conflicts I was in, how many conflicts I had to resolve. But by the grace of God, all of that happened very successfully. From Guyana, I came back to India. I worked for 10 years in the tea, coffee, cardamom, rubber plantation industry in South India. There again, for those 10 years, I dealt with conflicts in my official role as the manager, as well as I was on the negotiation committee of UPASI, United Planters Association of South India, and I was the chairman of the KDPA in Kanyakumari. That's the Kanyakumari District Planters Association. I was the chairman of that. So I have done innumerable labor wage negotiations, terms negotiations, lockouts, work resumption settlements, all kinds of conflicts. In addition to that, conflicts within teams, conflicts between spouses, because one of the things that I have been forced to do, and I don't do this it's not my profession, I don't do this generally speaking, but close friends and so on and so forth, between husband and wife, very severe conflicts. And then, of course, I have also taught this course on conflict resolution worldwide, across the world, sometimes part of a leadership development program, sometimes as a standalone program. And what I want to share with you is my learnings with regard to conflicts. The single most important learning as far as resolving conflicts is concerned, it might sound like a redundant thing to you, it might sound to you like something which is self-evident, obvious. I don't usually make apologetic preambles about what I'm going to say, but this one I think it's necessary. Because what I'm going to say to you is going to sound very simple. And this thing that is absolutely critically required, the one ingredient without which no conflict can be solved, and the one ingredient, if it is present, then there is no conflict on the face of the planet, whether it is between two people or whether it is between two countries, that cannot be solved. And that one ingredient is sincerely wanting to resolve that conflict. Sincerely wanting to resolve that conflict. If both parties, or if it's a multiple party conflict, if all the individuals or organizations or nations who are involved in a conflict, now listen carefully, I'm going to say that again. If all the individuals, organizations or nations who are involved in a conflict, no matter what nature of that conflict may be, no matter for how long that conflict may have been going on, no matter how bitter that conflict may have become, there is no conflict on the face of the planet that cannot be resolved if all the parties who are involved in that conflict are sincerely desirous of resolving it. They sincerely want to resolve it. As I told you, it sounds like it is self-obvious, self-evident, and so on and so forth. But you will be surprised, or maybe you will not be surprised. The number of people who come to you and say, I want this conflict to be resolved, but effectively, they don't want it to be resolved. Because they are getting payoffs from that conflict. They are benefiting from this conflict. Sometimes the benefit is material, sometimes the benefit is psychological, sometimes the benefit is emotional and so on. But there is a benefit, and sometimes the benefit doesn't even look like benefit. The benefit is, for example, one party may benefit, within quotes, by appearing to be downtrodden and appearing to be oppressed and by appearing to be maligned and so on and so forth. And they are getting a payoff from that. They like to be in that victim situation. If you have done, those of you who haven't read, done it or read about it, read Transactional Analysis. It's a wonderful body of psychology. And in that Transactional Analysis is a wonderful book called Games People Play. And in the description of this video, you will find a link to that. Get the book. It's called Games People Play. And you will be surprised. There is a classic TA model of conflict, which is the oppressor, the victim, and the rescuer. This is a triangle, and it's a negative triangle. Never fall into any of these positions. For example, don't become the aggressor or the oppressor. Obviously, don't play victim, and do not, for God's sake, become a rescuer. This is one of the most negative forms and one of the most common forms of conflict that happen. Especially in conflicts between spouses, you will have a rescuer in there, apparently trying, and all three parties, they are benefiting psychologically and emotionally from that conflict. So really, if you look at these conflicts, which go on for a long time, the single biggest reason is the people involved in the conflict do not want it to be resolved. Now, no matter how much they deny that, no matter how much they tell you, no, you are wrong, we want this conflict to be resolved, see how long it has been going on, see how much we have lost and so on, all of that is a load of, processed grass. Don't believe any of that. If they are serious about resolving the conflict, it can be resolved. I give it as a challenge to anyone, anywhere in the world. If you are in a conflict, whether you are two countries, whether you are two individuals, whether you are two organizations, if you are in a conflict and if you sincerely want to resolve that conflict, call me and I will help you resolve that conflict, and I will guarantee you that that conflict can be resolved. But the bottom line is, you need to be sincerely interested in resolving that conflict, which means that you have to own up to the fact that you have been getting payoffs from this conflict, and therefore if you resolve the conflict, those payoffs are going to go away. You will have something wonderful thereafter, which is a conflict-free situation of tranquility and peace and harmony, but you need to really want that. Otherwise, as long as you are benefiting from this payoff, which is a nasty, dirty, filthy, negative thing, you are going to be in that conflict and it will not go away. I'm sorry to be a bit long about this, but this is the actual fundamental reality as far as conflicts are concerned. So anytime you see a conflict that is going on for a long time, be assured that's happening because the parties involved do not want to resolve that conflict. Now, having gotten over that, as I told you, I've done lots of conflict resolution. One of the tools that I use in this conflict resolution, I'm going to teach you that tool very quickly. That tool is called active listening. Now, active listening is when the two parties in a conflict or the multiple parties in the conflicts, when you get together to resolve the conflict, first thing is you sincerely want to resolve the conflict. Now, next one is each person talks about their view of the conflict. Now, the other person, what they do, the listeners, is they listen carefully and then they paraphrase. They tell the speaker what they understood. Now, please understand, listen is not equal to obey. The reason I'm making this point is because this is how our language is structured. Parents say to children, listen to me. What do they mean? They mean obey me. Do what I am telling you to do. Teachers say that to their children, bosses say that to their subordinates. When you are saying listen to me, you are not just saying gather the data, take in the data. No, you are saying listen to me, meaning obey me. Now I am saying to you that in active listening, listen only means listen. It means to carefully pay attention to what the person is saying, attempt to understand what they are saying, and then repeat to them what you understood. Please notice, I'm not asking you to repeat their words. I'm asking you to tell them what you understood them to be saying. So if I tell you, for example, that tomorrow morning I'm going to Bangalore, if you are listening and you are actively listening, then you will say to me, I understand you to be saying that tomorrow you are going to Bangalore and you will not be here. Is that correct? Now, it's a very simplistic example. In a conflict, it will be more complex, and therefore, you need to do active listening. So, let one person talk, you will not interrupt, you will listen carefully, and then you will tell them how you understood them. I understand you to be saying such and such. Now, what happens if the person disagrees? The speaker said something, and you said, I understand you to be saying such and such. And the speaker says, no, that's not what I said. Then what must you do? You must keep quiet. You must say, well, can you please repeat that then? Let the speaker repeat that. You continue with this exercise. You say, okay, now I understand you to be saying this. Is it correct? If the speaker says, yes, it is correct, then the speaker goes on to the next point and you listen and you do the same thing. The reason we do this is because of there are two reasons. First reason is, many a time we say something, we ask someone, did you understand? The person says yes, and then the person goes and does something the opposite of what you told him to do because he understood it in his own way. So when I want to say to you, did you understand? What I really mean is, did you understand this the way I want you to understand this? There was a funny incident. A friend of mine phoned me once and said, can you please come to my office? There's an urgent matter that I want to consult with you on. There's somebody else here who I want you to meet. So I said, okay. I didn't have transportation at that time, so I told him, send your car. He said, I'll send my car. Now I am waiting. This man's office is about 10 minutes drive from my place. I'm waiting half an hour past, almost an hour past. So I thought maybe, he doesn't need me anymore. He solved it himself. And then he phoned me. He said, what happened? You haven't come. I said, your car hasn't come. He said, oh my God, let me check. And then he called back. He said he will be there in 2 minutes. The driver came. I went to his office. Now I asked him, I said, what happened? What had happened was, he said to the driver, go and pick up Mr. Baig. He's at home. Now this friend of mine is a very good friend and I visit him quite often. When this person said to the driver, go and pick up Mr. Baig, he's at home, the driver understood it as home meaning that man's home. He thought, I am in his boss's house, so he went to his boss's house. And he's waiting there for me to come out. I'm in my house, I'm not in his boss's house. Now you might say, well, stupid driver. So point is, people understand you the way they understand you. And unless you check, you have no way of knowing how you were understood. So active listening, the first benefit of active listening is, it helps you to know how you have been understood and whether that's correct. Now this is from the perspective of the speaker. From the perspective of the listener, the big advantage in a conflict situation is when you are able to understand the speaker clearly, and if you are able to say that to the speaker now is convinced that you have understood him or her clearly. There is a huge trust that gets built. The speaker now feels confident, yes, I have been understood. Second thing is, you really get a picture of what the speaker really wants. Many a time you might be surprised when you get down to it, you sometimes scratch your head and say, well, if this is what he wants, what was this conflict all about? Because this is fine. I've got no problem with this thing. So it means that all this while you were in a conflict, in a situation where there was no conflict. And the reason why you were in a conflict is because the two of you didn't understand each other properly. So active listening is a wonderful exercise. I've tried it in all kinds of conflict situations. I've tried it in some of the worst conflict situations, which is between communist Marxist union leaders and management. I was part of the management delegation in every single one of those instances. And in a very tight, high tension kind of situation, we tried active listening. And it was amazing how it opened the minds of people. We resolved the conflicts and we walked out of there like friends. It was difficult because people don't want to try out new things. This is where your own personal credibility plays a huge role. If people respect you, if people believe you, then they will try out new things. So set this up and say that we are going to be practicing active listening. If people don't know what is active listening, explain it to them and say that you are going to be speaking. The speaker will speak for a few minutes. If it's a long thing, then speak for a few minutes. Then get the feedback from the listener. Let the listener tell you how he or she understood you. Satisfy yourself that that understanding is correct the way you want it, and then go forward. Do this because it is important for us to understand each other before we start getting into the action part of conflict resolution. So active listening is the tool, and this is how you need to do that. So I want you to go and practice this. At the end of this session, I want you to go and practice this. It doesn't have to be a conflict. Just have a conversation with somebody and say, we are going to be practicing active listening. It's also called paraphrasing. You're going to be practicing paraphrasing. Please remember, you're not repeating the words. You are only telling them how you understood them. That's very important because people just looking at your face, they don't know how you understood them. We don't come with a digital readout here. So therefore, it's very important to share our understanding with each other. Now, having done that, you will find that conflict resolution becomes very easy. Second thing you need to do is, in a conflict, give as much information as you can. Now, this is again seems to go against the usual understanding. In a conflict situation, people like to keep things as close to themselves as possible. They like to share as little information as possible. Believe me, the more information you share, the more room there will be in order to come to good conclusions. For this, there is a tool that is called open space technology. Harrison Owen of the United States, he is the inventor of that technology. Harrison is a dear friend of mine, and we have done many open space workshops in many situations, some dealing with conflict, some dealing with new business ideas, some dealing with time to market kind of things, and so on and so forth. It can be used for a multiple number of things, but go read up open space technology, try that. The whole, I'm not going to teach open space technology here, but the basic principle behind that is to share as much information as possible rather than as little as possible. The theory and the philosophy behind that being that the more information we have, the easier a solution will become. And take my word for it, I'm talking from 35 years of experience in conflict resolution. It works like magic. The more you become secretive, the more you hold information closer to your chest, the worse your situation will be, the more difficult the conflict will become. Because people get polarized, and then we get into a yes-no situation, and that is almost impossible to solve. But the more information we share, the more paraphrasing we do, the better we understand each other, the easier it is to resolve conflict. Third point. First, active listening. Second, opening the space, opening and being as open as possible, sharing as much information as possible. By all means, if there is some proprietary information, if there is some truly secret information, don't share it. But by and large, share as much as possible. Third thing is to respect each other. I think this is, maybe I should even say this as the first one, but this is the fundamental thing, to respect one another. And sometimes, especially where conflicts have become very bitter and they've been going on for a long time, genuinely respecting the opposition, so to speak, is very tough. I know it's tough, but it has to be done. Unless you genuinely, and the key word is genuinely, it has to come from the heart. Play acting cannot be sustained. unless you genuinely respect the other person, you will find that the conflict will not go away. If you talk down to the person, if you are arrogant, if you make fun of them, if you mock them, if you are sarcastic, all of these are negative things. Sarcasm is not humor. Please understand that, and therefore do not do any of that. Make sure that you genuinely respect the person, and this respect is demonstrated. Now we come to the conflict resolution styles. I hope you have taken the instrument, Thomas Kilmann's conflict resolution mode instrument. So take that instrument, it will give you your preference of the style. I want you to take that instrument before you look at the conflict resolution model that will be on your screen now, because if you don't do that, then you are likely to get influenced in your answering the questionnaire by the model. Thomas Kilmann, they mention 5 different conflict resolution styles. Please understand there is no good style and bad style, even though the collaborative style, the win-win style seems to be the best, but I will tell you, places where that might not work. So the issue is not which style is good and which is bad. The issue is what is your default setting, so to speak. We don't really come with a default setting by birth or anything, but it's something that we get conditioned to, and so you might find yourself that you approach almost all conflicts in one way, and you find that this is not working for you. It's getting more and more complicated. It's getting more and more bitter, more and more heated without much light. You need to change. So therefore, it's very important to first understand where you are. So take the instrument, keep that finding aside, and then listen to my explanation about the model. The Thomas Kilmann model is based on 2 factors. One is assertiveness, and the other one is cooperativeness. When we put it in a 4-blocker, when we put it in a graph, you have assertiveness on the vertical axis, and you have cooperativeness on the horizontal axis. Now, if you have a situation where you are highly assertive but also highly collaborative, that is the top left corner, we call that collaborative style of resolving conflicts, or win-win. Highly assertive, highly cooperative. What does that look like? It means I must have what I want, no compromise in that. I'm not going to downgrade that. I must have what I want, but also I am going to help you to get what you want. Both of us, 100%. I want you to keep this in mind, because this contrasts with another style which we will come to in a minute. So top left corner, collaborative style, win-win. I must have whatever I want, and I am going to help you to get whatever you want. Both of us will walk away from here win-win, entirely with what we wanted for both of us. That is highly assertive and highly cooperative. We come to, I'm going down to the next one, which is the bottom left corner, which is low assertiveness but very cooperative. Low assertive, very cooperative. And we call that the accommodative style. The accommodative style really is to say that I don't care if I am put to extra trouble. I don't care spending time, money, energy, and effort behind something, but I am going to help you to succeed. Now, this is again a wonderful style, obviously, and it will win you a lot of friends and so on and so forth, and we'll come to the downside of it. So basically understand the style first. First one, highly assertive, highly cooperative, we call that collaborative win-win. Very low assertiveness, high cooperativeness, meaning I am going to help you to win even if it is at my cost. We call that accommodative. We go to the top right corner, which is highly assertive, low cooperation. Highly assertive, low cooperation, we call that the competitive or the win-lose style. Effectively, you are saying, I must have whatever I want and you can go to hell. I mean, that's effectively what the competitive style is, I don't care what happens to you, I am in here for, this game is for me, I have to win this game. In the process, if you lose, that's your problem, not mine. So highly assertive, low cooperation. We come to the bottom right corner, which is low assertive, low cooperation. Low assertive, low cooperativeness, and we call that the avoiding style. Meaning, I am too small to fight you, but I am not going to allow you to win. I can't stand up and fight you, so I am going to fight you in clandestine ways from behind the back. I am going to avoid, I am going to try and run away. If I can't run away, I will drag my feet, I will go slow, I will do whatever, but I will pretend perhaps to be agreeing with you, but I am not going to do that. So, low assertiveness and low cooperativeness, we call that the avoiding style. Now, having said that, the avoiding style is not really a conflict resolution style, even though we are talking about it here. I'll come to that in a minute. Just keep it in your mind for the moment. Bang in the middle of this four blocker, we have what is called a compromise, which is some level of assertiveness, some level of cooperativeness. Thomas Kilmann called it lose-lose. That makes it sound bad, but it's not that bad. Effectively, that's a situation where in a conflict, you find the two parties are evenly matched. They are literally at loggerheads. Nobody wants to move from that position, but we can't remain there. We need to resolve that. So we say, all right, what I'm going to do is to come up with a solution which is not exactly what you want and not exactly what you want. It's a part of this and a part of that. So maybe 80% of this and 80% of that, but it's some solution. It's not, you're not stuck in one place. It is some solution. Now let us look at all of these styles one by one. Now you look at, I'm starting from the top right corner, which is the competitive style, win-lose, forcing or competing. Now when is this useful? There is only one or a couple of places where this is useful, primarily in non-negotiable issues. For example, issues of ethics and values and integrity, where you say, sorry, there's no compromise on this. We do not give bribes. We do not discriminate against anybody in employment, and so on and so forth. So things where there is no room for any leeway. This is how we do things. This is how we work. That's it, period. Khalas. There is no room for changing that. Issues of ethics, morals, and values. Number two is sometimes in emergencies and firefighting, there is no time to explain things to people. You just tell them, there's a fire, get out of this room. And if somebody says, well, how do I know there is a fire? You shove him out of the room. You say, don't care whether you know it or not. I know it. I'm telling you, get out, just get out. So you use that style in emergencies and firefighting. Vital proprietary information, you want to keep that confidential. Somebody says you have to, you must give it to us. So, sorry, this is not negotiable. We can't give it to you. And in some cases where you find that you might be people might be taking advantage of you, there also you put a line. So all kinds of boundaries, maintaining boundaries and saying, this is what I will do. I'm sorry, I will not go beyond this boundary. That is the competitive style, and this is where it is useful. Now, one problem with the competitive style is that the competitive style almost always results in friction, almost always results in even if not broken relationships, certainly strained relationships. So I would strongly suggest that if you have to use the competitive forcing win-lose style in a conflict situation, that you go back and explain to people why you are doing what you are doing. Once the temperatures have come down a bit, go and explain to them. Don't leave them without an explanation. Go and explain to them and say, this is the reason why I was rigid in this matter, and I hope you understand. Whether they understand it or not doesn't matter. You make the effort and you try to explain it to them in a way that makes sense. We come to the second one, which is the problem solving or collaborating win-win. I think this is goes without saying. Obviously, it's a very good style to gain commitment, to get teamwork, when the issues are important for both sides and so on. The big benefit of this style is that it builds relationships. it's a good team building style as well. For want of a better word, the downside of this is that sometimes this takes a bit longer than you might want to spend. But I would say that any ongoing relationships, believe me, it's time well spent. Whether it's in the family, with your spouse, with your children, with your subordinates, with your colleagues, in your teams, with customers, it is worth the time to talk to people, to build a relationship in order to solve conflicts, and to try to do that collaboratively, to try to help the other person also to get what they are looking for. I think it is well worth the time, because these are ongoing relationships. You're not getting into a taxi and getting out. This is an ongoing relationship in your personal life or in your official life, and therefore it is worth the time and energy to build and resolve conflicts in a collaborative manner. We come to the third one, which is the one in the center, the bargaining or compromising, win-lose, lose-win. Not just lose-lose, win-lose, lose-win. This is, as I said, first and foremost, it's very important to do it when there seems to be no other solution. So this is not going to be your first choice, but this is a choice that you will make when you find that nothing else is working. Some kind of bargaining, temporary settlement. Remember, the word is temporary. Always go back to a compromise later on to see if there is a better way of resolving it. And many times you find that this can work out for you. Beware of giving in to pressure and coming up with an expedient solution that might come back and bite. So be careful of that. Don't fall into that trap. So this is the downside of bargaining and compromising. But the upside of it is that it works. It helps you to get over that logjam. It helps you to move on in your life. Avoiding, as I mentioned, is a style where effectively it's not a conflict resolution style, because conflicts avoided are conflicts postponed. They never get resolved. You have to come back to that at some point in time and resolve it properly. Otherwise, that conflict is going to come over and over again, and it will never get resolved. And that's why it's not a resolution style. Now, you might say, well, why would I use it at all? Well, you would use it because for one thing, it's like a cool down time. In heated negotiations, it's sometimes very useful to say, all right, let's take a break, go have some coffee and so on and so forth. Let's meet back after an hour, after half an hour, when tempers have cooled down and people are now willing to look at things more objectively. Also, during the breaks, you get a chance to do a bit of lobbying, you get a chance to talk to people one-on-one and help them to understand, because people then are more open, more amenable to listening, rather than when they are officially sitting across a table in a conflictful situation. So avoiding a conflict is useful sometimes, but as I told you, don't imagine that if you avoided a conflict that it went away. Many times you find this in families. For example, in my family business consulting, I have seen many cases where the founder of the business, the father, the grandfather, whoever is there, and he says, all right, now enough, that's enough, now shake hands, that's enough, no more conflict. Now, out of pressure, people will shake hands, but believe me, the conflict is still there. The conflict is very much there, and the moment this pressure is gone from the head of the family, they are going to be at each other's throats. Nothing has resolved, nothing has changed. Just because they go away because of some pressure does not mean that the conflict got resolved. So it's very important, by all means use it as a tool, but come back and face the conflict and resolve it. Conflicts avoided are conflicts postponed. We come to the final one, the smoothing or the accommodating style, which is I want you to win and I will help you to win, even if it's at my expense. Upside of it, of course, this is a wonderful style. It's something which will get you a lot of brownie points. It's something which you will make a lot of friends. But It is something which can be very stressful for you. It's something which will take away from your own family time and things like that. So be at least mentally prepared for that. Because if you take on too much stuff, then you are going to get a bad name in both places, because if you take on too much stuff, you will not be able to help the people you're trying to help, as well as you will be taking away from the other people to whom you owe your time and effort, and it can end up in a needlessly bad situation. So by all means, accommodating is a good thing. It will help you to make friends. In cases of subordinates, it is an important thing to do, because if you really want to mentor people, then it is going to take some of your time. So I always tell people who, before they volunteer to be mentors to anybody, make sure you really want to do that work, because that is going to take out of your time. You need to have that time to be able to do that. So these are the styles of conflict resolution. To close, I want to talk about two things. One I call the barriers to conflict resolution, and the second one I call the gateways to conflict resolution. In barriers to conflict resolution, the bottom line is lack of respect. That is one of the biggest barriers. When you have lack of respect and you have low trust, and having low trust in conflicts is natural, so be mentally prepared for that. But if you are not sharing enough information, if your attitude is superior, arrogant, moralizing, judging, making evaluative, judgmental statements, getting defensive, smoothing over the problem, hiding from differing opinions, being prescriptive, making the other people feel like outcasts and as if they are criminals, all of these things are net negative, and they are not going to help you resolve the conflict. As I mentioned before, the more restricted the space, the less you share. The more restricted the space, the more restricted the space, the more intractable the conflict becomes. You want the conflict to become flexible, you want to solve the conflict, open the space, share information, show trust, and you will find that the conflict becomes easy to resolve. Which brings us to the 5 gateways, which is, as I said, number 1, respect. Show respect for each other, genuine respect. Number 2 is active listening, paraphrasing. Genuinely try to understand the perspective of the other person. That is extremely important. Believe me, when you are listening, you are not agreeing, you are only listening. You are not accepting, you are only listening. But that listening is very important, because unless you listen properly, you don't even know what the other person's situation is. And when you don't know what the situation is, how on earth are you going to resolve that? So it's very important for both parties to listen very carefully, listen with confidence, listen with the willingness to change your point of view. Because now this is straight from the horse's mouth. You're talking to the horse, he or she is talking to you. Listen to them carefully. Then, not everyone knows how to speak objectively. People may speak in a subjective way. People may speak in a way which is offensive to you. Keep your emotions out of this. Keep your emotions locked up in a box outside the room. Listen coolly, calmly, objectively, and remain neutral. If you find that you are getting really hot under the collar, if you find that somebody is irritating you, take a break, go outside, cool down, then come back. It's very important to remain objective. Thank the person for speaking, express your understanding, and then come to a resolution between both of you. Works beautifully, works every time. As I said, open the space. The more you show respect, the more you build an atmosphere of trust, the more you are open with information, the easier the conflict is to resolve. And I want to end with the same thing which I began with, which is, are you sincerely interested in resolving the conflict? Answer that first question. If that answer is yes, then there is no conflict in the world that cannot be resolved. If the answer is no, and you need to be clear in your mind, you will not say no, but you know in your heart that this conflict is helping you. You are getting a payoff from this conflict. No matter how nasty that might be, you are benefiting from that. Believe me, that conflict will never go away. So be sincere about actually resolving the conflict, because at the end of that, that little miserable payoff you were getting was worthless. What you're going to get is tranquility and peace and harmony, and that is worth, believe me, that's worth more than anything else that you can possibly have. I wish you all the very best. I wish you a life that is as conflict free as can be. And if there is a conflict, I hope that this short lecture will be useful for you to resolve that conflict. Thank you very much for listening.